So final question, again, starting reverse order, so Ayesha, starting with you, is there's been this whole myth or reality, I don't know, I'm going to ask all three of you the same question, which is typically the rise through the security ranks is technical. And increasingly what we're talking about here is much, much more inclusive. There's empathy, meeting people where they are, adapting. So I know there's been a lot of talk about needing to talk the business language, talking to the board, storytelling, but I haven't heard too much about what we are talking about today, right? So if you have the typical CISO going through the technical ranks, how does he or she now become more ingrained with what we're talking about today? Ayesha, your thoughts?
How can you become, and so today I've heard about Akamai, I've heard about Microsoft, and I think I'm gonna talk about the mid-market CISO. I'll talk about the small business CISO. These guys don't have, with respect, the resources, right, that Microsoft does or Akamai does, and I think they're probably the one that are most challenged. And I think we all as individuals have a responsibility within this community to do the extra effort. I'm going through the hiring process right now. I believe with the abilities that I have working for a smaller company and making a concerted effort, ensuring that my candidate pool is extremely diverse, that all backgrounds, and that I'm giving everyone the opportunity, because these are jobs that we're hiring at a global scale. And I'm really being, going out of my way to know that. The other thing I'm doing is doing researches, whether it's reaching out to empower her cybersecurity to be able to give more women the opportunities, or really learning about all these different programs as it comes to neurodiversity. Because frankly, Craig's article, which when I remember when it originally came out, really did, kind of go, whoa, because it did receive a lot of publicity. And I was like, this is a topic that we're not talking about in cybersecurity. And, working in threat intel, I mean, there's a huge, it can really make companies successful by using these talents that, neurodiverse people have, like attention to detail, being able to find a needle in the haystack, being able to do that detailed due diligence. There's a lot of aspects that can help us, from a cyber attacks perspective. And I think we should be certainly leveraging that. But the how, when it comes to the mid-market and below, frankly, I'm really looking forward to hearing Andy and Diana's thoughts on it, because I'm also at a loss. Because if you think about these cybersecurity companies, they're investor driven. They have X amount of dollars to spend. How can they make a difference? Or even a mid-market company where the CISO is still trying to get buy-in for just the tools, right? With their CIO they're reporting into maybe. So what do, right? How do they spend the time educating themselves? But I think it starts with a skill, like it's the opportunity to be more competitive. I don't know, I'm looking forward to that. So let me be the semi-moderator and put it back on you guys.
Diana, you're on the hot seat.
So I think a big area where there can be improvement for small and large companies is in the hiring process itself, because that's where the neurodivergent often get cut out. So if you're on the spectrum, you may have trouble making eye contact, for example, and that would be, in a lot of HR, interviewers would say, oh, couldn't make eye contact. Or some people on the spectrum, their facial expressions, they don't respond in the same way. They may not smile at the right time, and so these are all things that can get them dumped out of the interview process. If you're asking somebody who's dyslexic to do a lot of reading and writing as part of that process, and it's very timed, you may be missing out on some really great skill sets. So I think that the main way that both small and large companies can really address this is to help back to your question, Ashwin, about CISOs rising in the rank. The CISO is going to be as strong as their team. And if we're missing out on fantastic candidates because we're putting them through an interview process that is really uncomfortable for them, and I say this with great shame. Early in my career, I worked at one of the big 4 consulting firms, and we had a massive hiring push. And we would be in a room sometimes working on a project together, 5 or 6 people, and we would bring a candidate in and we would ask them horrible big 4 kinds of, can you think, it was the mid-90s, can you think outside of the box sort of questions? And I can't imagine what that must have been like for the people that made it through. Great. I think we probably missed out on a ton of fantastic candidates because we just weren't being flexible in how we were interviewing. So I think that's what that would make a big difference if we just change that process.
Great. Andy, take us home.
So What Dana just said is fantastic, but I'm going to move even earlier into the job posting. And everybody says there's a cybersecurity skills shortage. They're absolutely wrong. There is no skills shortage. And I will like put money on that one, because the challenge is what shows up as a shortage is everybody wants to hire the perfect employee. They want to hire the person who is deeply technical, can write in amazing, hopefully in multiple languages, is wonderfully skilled managing people, and can design organizational processes, right? Like, let's just be very clear. There are very few people who are even close to doing that, and you probably can't afford them. What you actually need to hire is the people who can do the stuff that you're weakest at, which was to one of Ayesha's earlier points, that you should look at what your team is capable of today and look at what work you need to do that you're not good at, and find people who might be good at that and be willing to admit that somebody's going to be part of a team. And say, look, our team might need all of these skills, but right now we're weak in these 5 areas. If you bring one of those as a strength, maybe you are a fantastic data analyst and you love, working through data. Maybe you are a writer. You're not Diana when she's tired. Maybe whatever it's going to be, those are the people you want to find. And here's a business value tip for you. First of all, they're going to be wonderful because they're force multipliers. They take your existing staff and remove work that they're not qualified from doing off of them. And because nobody else is looking for them, you're not competing on them for salary. You're not competing with Facebook and Google, who are paying outrageous salaries for those unicorns. You're just trying to build a team full of good people. You don't need superstars to build a superstar team.
Wow. Yeah, go ahead.
Add to just the job, absolutely in the job description. And I think there needs to be a change from, if you're hiring someone in this, stock good communication skills, if they're not external facing, like, having those, I think there needs to be, even the job description needs to be modified. So it's not like the same requirement of teamwork and communication skills. And I think we need to start with that, because those are just basic things that need to go away. It should be very specific. And I think people that are, for example, on the spectrum, you have to be very specific in the requirement of what you're looking for them to do and what the expectation is as a manager. So I think you're right. And then also when we get to the interview process, as you mentioned, and then the evaluation when they are working for you has to look a lot different. And that means that hiring managers, people managers have to be educated on that. I mean, we all have to make that effort. But yeah, I could not agree. It has to start from the beginning.
Wow. Okay. So I think we covered a lot of ground over here. Thanks for your time, Ayesha. Thanks for your time, Diana. And thanks, Andy, for your insight.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Ashwin.
Thank you.